don't know yet if you've been, thank you, Jess. We don't know yet if you've been shortlisted or not, but this is a pitching webinar for all of you so that in the case you are shortlisted, you can prep for what that panel will be like and, you know, presenting your innovation, sharing your passion and what you're working on or wanting to work on. So we're going to give you a lot of information that you feel really prepared. And I just wanted to say also, this is just a great exercise, no matter what happens with your application, and a bit like the application structure and process of thinking about the different aspects of your project in the same way. It's something that can really prompt you to just, you know, learn to speak or continue to speak about what you're passionate about, the innovation you're working on, and the wonderful work that you do. So just for housekeeping, if you can have your camera on, that's really great because we get to see you, and just make sure to turn off your mic unless you're unmuting yourself to ask a question. If you can change your Zoom name to your full name in organization or innovation, that would be amazing. And like some people have already done, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your organization, even your role. But yeah, we're just really happy to have you all here with us today. And yeah, my name is Swazik. I think I've talked to quite a few of you already, had some one-on-one meetings with you. I'm the head of Innovation Award here at the Fair Education Alliance. And because I've got a very now long background, over 10 years of working on entrepreneurship in the education and youth sectors, and, you know, sitting on different funds and programs, I've worked a lot with, you know, supporting people who need to do their pitching to a certain fund, a certain award, and looking at what good pitching looks like. I'll say a few words about Jess, and then if you want to add anything, please feel free to unmute yourself. Jess is our amazing comms and event manager for the awards, also here at the Fair Education Alliance. But as if that was not enough, she also has her own charity and language schools. And that means that she's also super knowledgeable about what pitching and talking about your project and your innovation, your passion is like. So you'll see there's some information in the webinar today that is quite structural and practical and about what pitching with us will be like, and some stuff that's more general advice, and that comes again from Jess and a variety of people on our team who are just really familiar with this way of talking and presenting projects. Jess, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Hi everyone, lovely to see you and lovely to see some of you again who I might have met at the booster. Yeah, just to add, Swazik, really excited to kind of match faces to names. Read some of your amazing applications, so really looking forward to this year. Yeah, thank you, Swazik.
Amazing. So today we'll be covering again what the kind of shortlisting and selection process is like, so you have a good idea of what, if you are selected for our shortlisting panel, what that experience and kind of expectations are and how you should pitch your innovation. I've gone and gathered the kind of typical questions that our judges ask. Obviously, the questions will be specific to your project, and there's no way for me to determine what those will be. But I think that will be just really good prep for you to look at. And of course, there's time for you to ask questions as they come up in the presentation, and also stop and make sure we have time for that. And we've got some additional tips at the end of the presentation. So we're going to really cover what that process is like and how you can best prepare. Just a reminder, the Fair Education Alliance is a coalition of over 280 cross-sector organizations now. We're really, really focused, as you know, on tackling educational inequality and making sure that no children is limited by their socioeconomic background. So just to know, because I know you've applied for the award, so you already know all of that and you have that focus, I know too. Just a reminder in terms of the shortlisting process, so that you kind of know where we're sitting in the overall selection process. So you've applied, you're here because you've applied for the Innovation Award, and you did that before or on the 31st of May and made the deadline. And what's happening in that is that judges, experts that we rely on are currently reviewing applications, and those judges will determine which applications will be selected for our shortlisting panel. That will be both 23rd and 24th of July, so that we have the time to see everyone that is shortlisted, right? But I really wanted to remind you that we're in this moment right now So it's normal that you haven't heard if you are shortlisted or not yet. We'll let you know at the beginning of July. I also wanted to let you know that the shortlisting panel is online, so you don't have to come in person. So hopefully that'll make that a bit easier if you are shortlisted. And then if you at the shortlisting panel, the judges decide that you should go on to the next panel, the final one, then you will have an additional date in August, another panel. But for today, I'll be focusing on the shortlisting panel. So again, that will be online in July, and we'll confirm a specific date in time at the beginning of July with you. Okay, that's kind of where we're sitting at the moment. And just so you know, in terms of the judges' background and expertise, they have a variety of experience. We've done that on purpose so that we kind of get that holistic feedback on your innovation. So we have school and education sector leaders. We have people really focused on delivering outcomes for children and young people, experts in impact and evaluation, policy and founders, and people who focus on entrepreneurship, sustainability, scaling, those sort of things. So you'll get that kind of holistic, wealth of experience, and that means that different people might ask you very different questions. And again, I'll go into detail a little bit on that. But we've done that on purpose so that you have people, who have enough of that varied experience to really look at all of the aspects of your application and really understand your project. And the judges are here to understand your project better. They'll be asking you questions about your innovation if you make it to panel, and they're also to kind of here to ask, clarifications, challenge you. So, there's a bit of that feedback to a part of the panel, even though that's not what they're here for. But, again, that's why we're preparing you for some of the questions that might come up. In terms of the day off, again, if you're selected for the shortlisting panel, we'll book a 30-minute online slot with you. And what will happen is that you'll join at the right time with us. I'll be there. We'll introduce you to the judges. And then you've got 6 minutes to present. So it's 6 minutes. And after 6 minutes, I will stop you. So it's, to that deadline, basically. But then there's a lot more time for judges to ask you questions and for you to talk with them. 60 minutes for that. And after that, they have a few minutes to score and also have a break in between the calls so that they can be human beings and go get a cup of tea. So the most important information for you to remember is that you've got 6 minutes to present. And then, there's a variety of questions that the judges might ask you. So 30-minute online with 6 minutes to present is the key information. So what's really good to do with that presentation is to kind of go into those sections that you might remember from your application. So you've already started thinking about each of those areas. So the problem you're addressing, your solution, the impact of your solution, your sustainability, your leadership, and the value add of the program to you. Obviously, you've only got 6 minutes, so it's up to you to decide how you do that, what you focus on more or less, but kind of thinking about reminding the judges of each of those areas and how you meet the judging criteria for each of those things is quite important. So I would keep those sections, if I can say that, in mind as you kind of prepare your presentation. Like I was saying, it's completely up to you how much time you spend on each section. You can make it very equal, spend 1 minute on each section. There might be a certain presenting style that is more something that you're comfortable with, or you might have an area that you want to talk about more, but you kind of want to spend at least 30 seconds on each area, which is one of the reasons that practicing maybe with your watch or something is quite important, because it's kind of hard to get a sense of that as you're presenting for the first time. So practice makes perfect in this case. And you'll have, this recording, by the way, and those slides. So, you'll have all of this information so you can prep. I really, really, really recommend that you practice, especially with someone, if you've got a friend, family member, a colleague who can kind of help you refine your pitch. If you're pitching for the first time, it's quite hard to get a sense of time. And it's really, really good to kind of train yourself to speak slowly, speak clearly, and also to become kind of comfortable enough with your presentation that kind of your ID, your passion shines through. I think of this a little bit like martial arts. When you train in martial arts, you're kind of practicing so much then if then something a bit stressful happens, you can just react. You already have the kind of movement and information that you need. And this is a bit of the same. So I really recommend, again, that you kind of time yourself, you practice with someone. That person can give you feedback on, how you're speaking, if you're clear, because it's likely, at least for me, when I have to do presentations on the day off, I'm a bit more nervous. So if you're well prepared, it will help with that bit of nerve that might be coming through. So yeah, you can decide, again, how much time to spend on each idea. But the more, I think, prepared you are, and also kind of practicing in front of someone if you can, is quite key here. Because it is online, we'll be using Zoom. You're very welcome to have slides to share your screen if you have something specific that you want to share. If you do have slides, please share them with us so that if there's any tech issue, if we're the one sharing them, we have your slides. And that's by the 18th of July, please, just so that we have time to make sure we have everything in order for the day off and that we're there to support you. Something I wanted to remind you of in terms of the slides, it's that it's really not there to replicate your application. The judges have already read your application. They already have those sort of, paragraphs or longer descriptions that you've put together. Really think about the key information you want them to have. You also might have graph that you could input in your application, headlines, I don't know, key figures, key facts. So I would say even this presentation today, there's probably a bit too much writing, because I'm putting it together so people can read through it when they're at home and still understand everything. So really thinking about, if you are using slides, how do you use that in the way that it supports your presentation? You're not trying to replicate your application. Again, the judges have read through that extensively. They will, know about your project. So it's really about making those 6 minutes work for you. I'm going to keep going because I feel like maybe a few more slides will answer some questions, and then I'll pose for questions. So don't worry about that. I can see the chat is going up, so I'll have a look through there. Okay, actually, I'll do that now, because then I'll tell you the most common questions. Any question in the chat? Presentations. Oh, it's great. Great question, Nick. I think the question is, will the slides help you to make your different points? I know that personally, I would prefer to have slides to kind of have, those kind of different sections I was talking about, and have them in front of me. I would prefer that. But it's also up to you to know, your presenting style. And again, that might be something, when you're practicing with someone, you can have a sense of what works for you, basically, which is why I really recommend it. What I tend to do is to kind of put a main structure and, like I say, key figures in my presentation, because then I don't have to remember that from the top of my head. And also, if I get nervous, I kind of have that kind of scaffolding to hold me in place and hold me kind of the right timeline through the presentation. So I would say try it out. And then when you're putting your slides together, try and think what's the information that's impactful on the judges to have in there, and also what helps you to present in a way that you're really communicating the main things about your innovation, and also giving a sense of, your passion and why you've decided to work on this through that. In terms of the format, Fikayo, that's a great question. I think PowerPoint would be the best for us. I know sometimes they can be saved in PDF, but then you have to scroll through, so that's not as great. So yeah, I would say PowerPoint would be good. If you have any issues with that, again, prepare in advance, let us know. We'll see if we can do something to help, but otherwise my answer would be PowerPoint. I'll go through the question. Tracy, if you applied last year, will this have a bearing on this year? It will be different judges, so it won't be the same people. So they won't have seen your application before, so you might get very different question. I think what might happen is they might, you might want to think about the feedback you received last year and really implementing that. I'm not sure if you've watched it or not, but we have our Teacherpreneur webinar. And whether you're a teacher or not, it's a great watch because Olivia, who's a past award winner, kind of details her experience with the award in that, and she speaks about how she took on the feedback. She wasn't selected at first, and then she came back, I think, the next year or 2 years after, and really taking that on and how that helped her with her next presentation, basically. So I would recommend having a watch at that if you can. But yeah, it won't be the same judges otherwise. But I would really, especially if there's any specifics around, saying anything like work on your sustainability, that area needs to be fleshed out, or anything about the style of your presentation, I would really go back to that and implement that. Because I think even personally for you, right, if you just end up getting the same feedback, it's kind of a difficult thing. So working on what you've heard and been given as feedback before as much as you can. Could Canva work? That's a really good question. I think I'm trying to remember if Canva allows you to download a PowerPoint. I can't remember. I think Google Slides will be fine for an alternative because I use Google Slides and it works with PowerPoint. I think try as much as you can to have a PowerPoint, because I think those kind of online sources will allow you to download a PowerPoint. So that should be yeah, okay. And if you have any issues with that, please let us know before we get right before the shortlisting panel, because otherwise those are the things that fall through the crack and we don't want that. And yes, excellent question. The Teacherpreneur webinar is on the website. Well, there you go. Jess is much more knowledgeable than me and says that Canva can be converted to PowerPoint, so that works. Okay, keep putting your questions in the chat. If you have more, I'll pose another time. But for now, I'm going to tell you about the questions that tend to come up with judges. So a big reminder before I jump into that is that the questions are completely specific to your innovation. We don't have kind of typical questions that we ask every applicant. That's not what I'm saying. So there's no way for me to tell you this is what you'll be asked. What I'm sharing with you, however, are the things that judges are likely to ask you, and that it would be good basically for you to be prepared to answer those questions in case they come up. And to be honest, I think they're good questions to wrestle with anyway. So again, the judges will have reviewed your application. They'll have prepared specific feedback and questions just for you in your innovation. So this is just a template and helpful guidance, not actually what you'll be asked on the day. So the first question that I really want you to think about is, how do you know that your innovation will benefit children or young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, since that's what we're focusing on through this innovation award? And what evidence have you got that your intervention works for your specific target group? So a few things about that question. It is 100% your job to back your innovation, your approach, and your methods with evidence. I know for some of you, you're really early stage, you haven't run a pilot yet, and all of that is fine, but it's kind of your job to argue for your innovation with evidence. It's not the job of the judges to kind of find out if there's evidence for your approach or for the way you work with a specific target group. So you really want to come prepared with that. This is a question that judges have asked applicants before. And again, it is your job to provide evidence to back your claims. It might be referring data you've got, research, pilots for them, some of you are further along. So thinking about what you can, again, mention, put together. You're not going to, talk about research for 2 hours because you've got 6-minute totals, but what are the things that you can maybe have on your slide or say that shows that you really thought through the way you're approaching things? And I think for most of you, it will be with that specific target group that you've got, because even though we're all having that focus on supporting children and young people from lower socioeconomic background, you're all working with different, subgroups within that. So really having a think about that work you do with your specific audience and thinking through the methods you have chosen, why you've chosen those methods, and why they're the best methods for the target group you work with. So again, that's a question that judges tend to ask. That is something that you want to really think through and kind of have an answer prepared for. If any of this doesn't make sense, pop a question in the chat and I will answer. But that was the first thing I wanted you to think through. Okay, so they might ask you about the specific audience of young people and children you work with, why you're working with them the way you are. And they might also ask you about the problem you've decided to focus on. So this innovation award is, as you know, focused on really, really reducing and hopefully one day disappearing the gap between children and young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and their wealthier peers. So what the judges might do is asking you why the specific problem that you're focusing on ties into this and helps reduce those gaps. So you really want to have an answer prepared for this question. Why is the specific kind of, I don't want to say smaller, but more focused problem you're working on feeds into this more macro kind of goal we're going for? So thinking about that and how you would answer that question. Oh, I'll pop into the chat, see if there's a question. Yeah, great. Okay, no question for now. So I'll move on to question 3. I think I've mentioned this quite a bit already with those of you I had a one-on-one call with, but I'll highlight it again, which is think through the expected education outcomes for the young people and children who are coming through your innovation. So for a lot of you, when we were talking about your application, we talked about this, and I told you there's kind of that problem section, right, that we've got in the application. And in that problem section, you're thinking about, for those young people or children we're focusing on, what's the problem for them? What are the education and overall outcomes they can't get to because of the problem? And then I told you, when you think about your solution, in the same way, think about what are the education outcomes that young people and children can get to if they come through your innovation. So I'm sure some of you have started to think through all of that. So think about those education outcomes for the young people coming through your innovation. And again, because you don't have 2 hours to present or answer a question, what are the key ones that you really want to share with the judges? When you're done with your presentation, what are the things, the 3-5 things that you want them to remember about your innovation? And remember, when we say education outcomes, I don't just mean grades and attainment, right? I mean broadly. I know some of you work on, access to higher ed, career prep, well-being, mental health, all of those things. So again, think for your innovation, what are those education outcomes that you are focusing on? And again, think about that first question: how much can you back this with evidence as much as possible, whether that's from your own work or from research data, etc., that's out there. Just check that that makes sense. Mark, I'm not sure if you want to say a bit more. You can unmute yourself if you want to ask your question.
Thank you. Yeah, so I fully am on board with educating the whole child, and as part of Choose Group, do that kind of thing. My project is very academically focused, so helping them improve their knowledge, helping them improve their understanding, to some extent improving their exam technique, with the view that giving them confidence and enjoyment and good grades leads to these other outcomes. When I'm asked a question like, how does this help the child more broadly, I kind of feel like, well, we have evidence that improving grades, like, is that something that I would just score weekly on, or is there a tact that you're looking for in particular?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I don't think there's anything particular that we're looking for. I think I would actually reframe what you've presented, which I think what you're talking about is that there's those short-term outcomes that come out of your project, right? They get better grades, they're more confident. And then we know that those short-term outcomes link to longer-term outcomes. So first of all, I would think, what's the stuff you can really back with evidence? Because that's always the best stuff to come through with. Even though you know, if you feel there's something really important about your project, you could also add that. But I think maybe a way to frame that for your project is like, well, short term is this, and long term we know that leads to X, Y, Z. And that gives you that kind of little frame to, again, what are the kind of 3 things in those 2 categories that are the most important to tell judges about. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you. That's a really great question. Oh, I'm glad. Thanks. Okay. Anything else on those questions before I move to the next slide? Nope. Okay. Well, pop anything in the chat if you need to.
I just thought of a question.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Sorry.
That's what I'm here for.
So the intervention that I'm working on is something that will benefit all children, but because we know that you know, sort of early years is where there starts to be this massive kind of disadvantage gap, it will kind of over advantage kids that are already disadvantaged, if that makes any sense. Plus also my intervention is going to be aimed at areas of disadvantage, so it's going to be operating specifically in those areas. So is that enough to say, to show how it's kind of targeting lessening that gap, or do I have to show that this intervention, you know, specifically works for kids that are starting at a disadvantage more than it would for other kids?
Amazing. Thank you. That's a great question. I think that'll probably apply to other people in the room and the recording too. So I think it comes back to that second question, right? So we're fine with projects that work with all young people. What you really want to do is illustrate how your innovation is going to support those children and young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So how, again, does your innovation help those young people and children to achieve X, Y, Z outcomes that they can't otherwise? So I would make that sort of thread or that storyline very clear. And I think, again, I think you're kind of talking about targeting certain areas of high deprivation. So I would also mention that, because that's part basically or how you're going to make sure to work with the target group that you're planning to work with. But we're fine if, you know, you're also working with other children in your innovation. That's not something that's going to be counted against you. What we're really interested is, again, how is this going to help close all of those gaps that exist? How is this going to support children and young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds? So I would say just make that clear. And I would also, in your specific case, I would look at a previous award winner called Stone Soup, because they worked also on early years. And I believe we've shared maybe the problem part of the application, but if you can't find that, we can share that with you. But they also have, their project is also explained on our website. So they would be a good, I think, project to look at, because they're also early years. And of course, because they were past award winners, they won. So I think for you specifically, or anyone working on early years, they're a really good example to look at. And you've also got the other, for everyone else, you've also got the other award winners on our website. So yeah, that's what I would do. I'll have a little look at the chat. Camilla, I think it really depends on what evidence you've got. So Camilla is asking for everyone if quantitative evidence is better than qualitative evidence. I think what's the strongest evidence that you've got? I know a lot of you will have qualitative evidence from your practice, and I think it's completely fine to bring that in. We know obviously that qualitative evidence is, you know, also part of showing that a project, an innovation has an impact. So I would, again, kind of reframe from, okay, quantitative, qualitative to what's the most kind of, I don't know if I want to say captivating, but what's the most key evidence I've got? And also, I think in our one-to-one call I mentioned, you kind of want to show that large-scale overall problem, right? This is a big problem in England because XYZ, right? And then you also want to show, again, what I've been mentioning, I know there's no typical young person, but just for this argument, for that typical young person or child you would be working with, what's the problem for them? And I think qualitative evidence can be really good to show that, or to show the impact of a program. So again, it's thinking through what's the best stuff to include in here, what's most impactful when I kind of share this innovation with someone. And I think if you can have a blend actually of the two, that can be really, really efficient. So look at what you've got and what's the best evidence to back up your innovation, if that makes sense. Great, those are fantastic questions. Thank you for that. I'll look into the chat. Oh, you're very welcome. Great. So some more questions that judges must ask you. I'm just going to get a drink. So in your application, you'll have talked about your sustainability, your business model, right? How you plan to turn your innovation in this sort of sustainable organization that can do this work in the education sector. Again, I know many of you are really, really early stage, and that's something that you're looking to do in the future. So what we really want to know is how you're planning to reach your chosen market, which I'll give an example because I think otherwise it's easy to look at that question and be like, wait, what does this mean? So for example, if you're planning to sell your program or your intervention to schools, how are you going to gain access to potential partner schools, right? How are you going to get schools who have really tight budgets already to work with you? What's the kind of, plan to reach the specific partners, organizations that you want to work with and that will be paying for your innovation? So have a think through that and try, I'll mention that again later on, but try and think, even if you're not doing that at the moment, what's your best hypothesis, right? So because this is an early stage fund, what I see sometimes with applicants is that, especially with sustainability and scaling, because that might not be where you're at right now, sometimes people just answer those questions saying, oh, I don't know, I'm not quite there yet. And then you really lose an opportunity to let the judges know how you're thinking about things, how you're seeing and envisioning your innovation, even though you're not at that point yet. So try and prepare for that question too. And I think it's actually really good, useful thinking to do anyway. So this is kind of a sustainability question. If you remember, again, in the application, you had that section to talk about your business model and your sustainability kind of plan. And I think in the same way, you might be asked that fifth question, which is when you plan to broaden the scope of your innovation, how would you manage that expansion? So if you remember in the application, you had sustainability and then scaling. So it's a bit those two sections again. If you're able to scale, even though you're not necessarily at that stage now, how would you do that? What are the challenges that, could come up? How would you manage that? So again, thinking of those different sections, and that's kind of one of the ways they could come up in questions from judges. So how are you planning to reach basically the people you need to reach to be able to make money through your innovation? And then if it works really well and you can scale and you can expand, what's the plan for that and how would you manage that? And by the way, this is those are sorts of key questions, because this year in the cohort of award winners, by the end of the program, we had several people who not only were working full-time on their innovation, they also needed to recruit because they had so much work that they needed other members of their team. So those are really relevant questions that might, really come up in the future, and judges want to know how you would approach that. So I hope that makes sense. Check the chat. We don't have, sorry, Sarah in the chat is asking if we have an expected number of young people we want you to say that you reach. We don't have a specific number, no. And again, you'll all be at different stages. So you'll have, maybe a certain number of young people you've worked on a pilot with, or you might just be starting, so that number is 0. So again, think about the questions I'm sharing in those presentation and how you would answer those for whichever, stage of your project you're at. We're not asking you to pretend to be further along than you are or anything like that. This is an early stage award, so it's completely fine. And yeah, we will send the slides and the recording, Celine. That's absolutely the plan. So I'll share the next question. That won't be relevant for most of you, but I know that some of you have a co-founder model that you've shared with us in the application. So try and be prepared to answer questions about, how you will be splitting things and why. So the judges might have a few questions about that, usually to make sure you're prepared and you've really thought through how you would go through the incubator with 2 people instead of 1. So if that applies to you, have a think about that. If it doesn't apply and it's only you going through the incubator, then you don't have to worry about this. Again, that 7th question will be something that's more or less relevant depending on your innovation, but I wanted to share it because quite a few of you have technology as a sort of key part of your innovation. That might be because you're developing an online platform or something like that. So if that is the case, I do think it is likely that the judges will ask you how you plan to manage this, how you plan to develop this, especially if you don't have kind of engineering and development skills yourself, and also how you might deal with the cost of those things, because that can be quite pricey if you have heavy development to do in that area. So if that applies to you, I would also think about how you would answer those questions. Again, I can't guarantee whether or not it will come up, but that is something I would prepare from. For the 8th question, that is relevant for all of you, because all of you will be working with children and young people. You need to think through safeguarding. It usually comes up. So judges are likely to ask you how you've thought about safeguarding and how you would incorporate that in your innovation. So how are you going to keep the children and the young people that you would be working with safe? And again, if there's tech involved in your innovation, they might ask you, right, how are you going to have safeguarding and make your online platform, for example, safe for the young people using it? Or if you're working with a specific group, vulnerable young people, they might kind of also ask more about that area. So something to think about, and I'm sure something we all think about in our work every day anyway. So have a think about that. Great. I'll go through the last question and then I'll have a look in the chat for your questions again. As I've mentioned before, kind of business model, sustainability, scaling, all of those things are part of the things we ask you about. Those are part of the things you also explain in your application. So a good question to prepare for is, who are your competitors? And let me explain a little bit more about that. It's possible that the judges that we have on the panel, especially because they're so knowledgeable and about schools and the education sector and innovation, it's possible that with the issue you're working on, they've seen other solutions working on the same problem. They might even have seen other innovations working on the same problem that have trialed and failed. So it's really good to come in the shortlisting panel being aware of the other solution, the other innovation in the market, who are doing roughly the same thing that you, or focusing on the same issue overall. And it's good to kind of be prepared to answer how you're either better or different, or how you complement what's already on the market. And to be really honest, a lot of the time I think about this stuff in a very simple, commercial way. We already have Coke and Pepsi. If you were to make another cola drink, how would it, break out on that market, and how would it be better or different than what's already there? So kind of thinking about that for your innovation, it's not to make you feel bad or to make you tell us that you are better than everyone else in the world or anything like that. But again, thinking about how you complement what others do. You might have links even with those organizations, or again, if you don't, you might have an idea of how you would want to collaborate with those other organizations, or with the kind of, field market you'll be in, and how what you're doing is different from them. And you've already done that, because again, many of you have seen in one-on-one calls, and I've told you, when you speak about your solution, speak about what's unique about what you do. Speak about what's unique and different about your innovation. So let's take an example. If you focus on body image in schools and there's another innovation that focuses on that, how would you kind of make the case for your approach, your innovation, the way you do things? So thinking about that, again, it's not to stress you out or to say, there's 10 applications like yours. That's not the case. The applications are all very varied, but really kind of preparing yourself to answer those questions so that then the kind of argumentation and your confidence in the innovation is very obvious and clear for the judges. Okay, I'm going to have a look at the chat again. Yes, so Celine, great question. So I think it's fine to be, from reading your application anyway, the judges will know. So Celine is asking about the fact that their business model could evolve in the future in different ways based on market response. So I think giving the judges your best guess, your best hypothesis, and maybe I'll give an example in a second that would be useful. It's based on what we know right now. I think the best model would be XYZ, but we're open to seeing, how I'll respond to the market. And if it goes, one way, this is what we'll do. And if it goes this way, this is what we'll do. So again, thinking through those things and coming to the shortlisting panel, kind of having those answers. Again, most of your really, really, really early stage. So the judges know you haven't done 100 pilots, run, a £1 million program or anything like that. What they want to know is that you've really thought things through and that you're ready, of course, to be adaptable in the future, but that you're actually to answer them with the best hypothesis you've have based on the evidence that you've got at the moment. So I hope that helps. Great. I wanted to share some final tips, maybe many of which are from Jess, who, as I've said, has been used to pitching herself. Obviously, I've given you that kind of structure and, the amount of time that you've got and potential questions. But there's also an aspect of this kind of work and presentation that is, introducing yourself and your story. I'm not saying spend the 6 minutes on that at all, but through, that panel, trying to just share a bit of who you are. And that will look very different from each of you because you'll have your own styles. But, trying to connect with the judges, you're welcome to share lived experience if you want to. You don't have to. It's completely your choice. But I think, it's helpful to kind of prep your presentation and then think about that aspect once you've kind of got those different sections we talked about and you've put the information that you want in there. How can you convey your passion? I mean, you've spent time on this application, you've spent time on thinking about or putting in place already this innovation. I don't think any of you are doing this to become millionaires or anything like that. So sharing that passion because you actually a lot of you have done this work for a long time, or you're really passionate about the issue you're tackling and making sure that comes through. And again, I think that is when that sort of preparation can help because then you're more confident, you kind of know where to fit things, and that can help making sure that comes through. Because again, the judges will just have read your written application. I've had the chance to talk to many of you, though not to everyone, but you kind of want to convey that when you're speaking. And also a helpful thing, I think, to think about is what's your elevator's pitch? What are the 2 sentences you would share with someone to share what your innovation is about? I'm not going to hide the fact that, we have now ChatGPT and all of those things that you can fit a paragraph about your innovation and make a sentence out of it. But I think you're the most, at the end of the day, you're the most knowledgeable about your innovation. So again, in that short 6 minutes, what's the information in each of those sections that you really, really want to share that is most key about your innovation? That's a bit more of a human aspect of presenting at panel. This is a bit of a tension that I wanted to share with you. We always say that you should be obsessed with your problem, That's partly because this program is an incubator, and what happens when you come through the incubator, you know, and you do testing and piloting and you revisit your problem and you do more research, is that your solution will upgrade and change. And whether or not you're selected for the program, I think in innovation and education, you'll have a lot of trouble finding someone who's not changed some aspect of their solution and innovation over time. However, was that all of that said, why, again, which I think linked to one of your questions, I don't want you to come to panel and say, well, you know, it'll depend. It'll depend on what happens with the innovation. It'll depend on what research I do on my problem. So what you really need to know is have a really kind of clear hypothesis for your solution and what that will look like, and really flesh that out, even though you're open to changing it when you learn more about your problem. So I've kind of put a typical like sentence or paragraph or way to think about lesson, which is, this is why I'm proposing XYZ. Here are the kind of logical steps for the activities or intervention that'll come from that. This is why I'm proposing those things. However, I'm open to feedback, right? So no matter what step you are in the development of your innovation, come ready with clear hypothesis about the different aspects of your innovation, whether that's sustainability or scaling or whatever it is. Do not be vague. When you're vague or you answer, you know, oh, well, I'm not at scaling stage yet, so I don't know. Again, you're not giving the judges anything to go on, basically. They're really, really interested to know how you're thinking about things. They're all really excited to hear more about your projects, your expertise. You're all working on those things because you have a lot of knowledge. So try and feature that as much as you can. And again, with the example I've given, you can do that while being really open to feedback. You can do that while knowing things might change in the future. So this is a bit of a tension. I don't think there's a perfect answer to it, but kind of keeping that in mind, that no matter what, you know, early stage you're at, just making sure you have your hypothesis quite clear. And again, especially for something like business model, you might have something like, well, you know, ID number 1 is, ID number 2 is, we need to do some testing and see what happens for, you know, things to be more defined. So again, the judges will know that this is an early stage award, and I don't think they'll mind that. Great. Let me check your questions again. Yes, exactly, Hikayo. So that'll be for the Q&A. So you have that 6-minute presentation where it's just you talking, presenting your innovation, those different sections I've talked about. And then there's 16 minutes for the Q&A. So the different judges will have questions they've prepared for you from your application, but also from the presentations you'll have just made. So again, it's specific things that they want to ask about your project. So it'll be really tailored to you. So the examples I've given are just things to prepare for and think about. But yeah, I can't tell you what they'll ask you on the day because I don't know. I think, Celine, the nature of your incorporated entity is something that a lot of you who have incorporated already, which is not everyone, have shared in your application. So we've got that. The judges might have question about why you've chosen a certain type of entity to incorporate as. And for those of you who aren't an incorporated organization yet, this is something, if you are selected for the award, that we would help you with. So we would help you decide which legal structure is right for you. So yeah, we'll have that information already, Celine. But yeah, they might have a question about that. I can't really tell in advance.
Can I ask a further question of clarification?
Yeah.
So am I right in thinking there isn't necessarily an assumption that it needs to be a social enterprise or a charity at the end of the day? It could still be a limited company or some other sort of more traditional form of...
Yeah, that's a great question. I think most have been social enterprise and charities. Right. For profits, we do ask for an asset lock. So what I will do, if that's something you're worried about, let's chat by email and I can give you more information about that because it's quite detailed.
Okay.
Things. So yeah, if any of you have a question about that, just get in touch and I'll get you the kind of proper answer, just so I don't share something that's wrong here from the top of my head. Sarah, when will you know if you've been shortlisting? At the beginning of July. I have that in the next slide. And the only way you would have to pitch in a pair, I think, is if you have a co-founder model that you've put in your application. So if there's 2 people coming through the incubator, we could have a chat about whether or not you'd pitch in a pair, because obviously you would be 2 people going through the program. I think if you're the lead innovator, you would have to pitch solo, if that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. And yeah, Jess has put in the chat actually the exact date, which is better. You will hear from us on the 5th of July. So if you haven't received anything before that, that's completely normal, and don't worry. Just going through your questions. Tracy, I don't know that there's anything that you shouldn't mention or avoid talking about. We're really transparent with applicants, and we expect applicants to be the same with us. I think it's more, I would flip the question again, because it's a presentation with a limited time. What's the really key important stuff to share? So I would flip that a little bit in the way that you think about it, which is, you know, what are the things that are really important in each of those sections I've mentioned and that you really want to share with the judge? Again, try and put yourself in their shoes a little bit, which is those judges have read through your application. So they know, you know, quite a bit about your project with everything you've put in there. But what's the stuff that you really want to share with them in those 6 minutes that you want to drive home? And what's the evidence, information that you've already got? Or ideas that you want to put in there to kind of make that very strong, if that makes sense. How many innovations will be shortlisted? From the top of my head, the answer is 10. If I'm saying something completely wrong, Jess will, I'm sure, call me out, but yeah, 10. And again, we'll, no, sorry, that's how many organization will come out of the shortlisting panel to go to final, excuse me. I'm sorry, I'm counting in the flowchart I've got in my head. I think it's about 30 for shortlisting, but I'll have to check. This is my first few months in this role, which is sometimes why I'm not too sure about the answer to that. But yeah, we have the shortlisting panel is 2 days, right? So you can imagine we have quite a few applications in there. Going back up a little bit to see if I've missed anything. Mark, great question. I think the judges will probably have quite a few questions if the financial sustainability was to come completely from a different product. So they would probably have, the question I would ask actually is, why can't any financial sustainability come from this product, right? And you know your project much better than I do anyway, but is it because I don't know, you're trying to reach into really deprived areas and there's no way to have budget in those areas, right? So again, really thinking through your business model and why you would want to set up things the way that you want to set them up. What are the risks? What are the benefits? And again, kind of readying yourself from that question from the judges. If they say, actually, you know, there's a way to make this financially sustainable, even though it's supported by another product, like how would you answer that? How would you make your case, basically? Yeah, I can see that Jess has put the number of applications we got, which was much, much higher than previous years. Anything else? Any other questions? I think I've covered everything. Okay, I'll go to next steps then. Please practice. I'm really not saying this because I don't think you're good at presenting. It's because it will be really helpful. You can practice in front of the mirror. It's very useful to practice with someone who can time you, who can also kind of mirror back how you're speaking and presenting yourself and your innovation. So yeah, practice, practice, practice. We will let you know if you've been shortlisted on the 5th of July, like Jess has mentioned. And just a reminder, like learning to pitch is a good thing anyway. You're all working on those really incredible problems and projects. So, you know, whatever happens with your application, this is a really good thing to dive into that will make you stronger, whatever happens with your innovation in the future. But yeah, the key thing is really, remember that structure we've mentioned today, and then practice. And thank you so much for joining us today. We'll absolutely send you the recording and the slides as we always do. We are 2 minutes left, so I'll see if there's any other questions before we end. Oh, actually, Tracy, we've had a lot more, I won't share exact numbers, but we've had a lot more, we have always more public applications than FEA members. So there'll be more members of the public shortlisted than FEA members, if that makes sense. Oh, you're very welcome, Nadia. Any other questions? I have time for one more before we leave. Any burning question? Oh, you're all very welcome. Can you add videos to your PowerPoint? Very interesting. What I would say to that is think about that very limited time that you've got, right? 6 minutes go by so quickly. Is there anything you can say, that you can convey, pictures you can use that will kind of share the same thing that you're wanting to share through a video? Because I understand if you've got video, especially of the impact or the young people you've worked with, but yeah, try and think about the time that you've got, because I'm thinking even if it's a 1 minute video, right, you've lost that 1 minute for one of the sections. But yeah, also, I don't know what you're going to include in your presentation or how much time you're spending on each section. So maybe trial it out and see how it feels with that video. You should be able to include it tech-wise, basically. But otherwise, I would, be mindful of basically that rhythm and that time constraint for your presentation. Amazing. Well, great. Thank you so much for all of your great questions. We'll be in touch with recording and slides. And otherwise, I hope you all have a really good weekend.
Thank you. One question, please.
Go ahead.
It's like a brainwave. Now, since this award is open to members and non-members, is it expected that a certain number of selected applicants will come from the members? In other words, is there a set number of members that have to get in?
That's a hard question to answer.
Okay.
I can't know before they're shortlisted basically who's scored well and who hasn't, because I'm not the one doing the judging. We usually have a mix of FEA members and public. That also works really well because it's kind of, you have kind of bigger organizations and smaller organizations or just early stage leaders involved that way.
Yes.
But what I can say, yes, it will be a mix. That exact number of the mix, I don't know at the moment.
No, I didn't expect you to know that. I just wondered whether in advance there's a system in place that says a percentage of the applicants have to be members. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I don't know what exact percentage that will be because I don't know, how's everyone.
No
but
problem.
what we want is a mix of both.
Yes.
So that's kind of what we're going for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. This is excellent.
Oh, thank you so much. Lovely to see you today. Thanks, everyone.
To see you too. Lots to think about.
Thank you.
Is it okay to use video during the Q&A?
I don't know if anyone has done that before. My gut reaction is I don't know if that would work really well. Because I think what they would most expect is from you to, make your case and share. I think what might be really useful to do is if you want to have certain stories or certain quotes in mind from, again, the young people and children you've worked with, I think you could have that on a slide. Sometimes what I do for presentations is that I'll have my slides that I go through in my presentation, and then let's say you ask me, I don't know, what have young people from that project said, then I've got a slide that I can go to that has that. So you could do something like that, I think.
Yeah,
Thanks.
makes sense.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks.